Time is fucking weird, man. Did you know that 10 years ago it was 2010, not 2000? 10 years passed and I was an adult for all of it. How fucked up is that? Anyway, with an arbitrary passing of time comes arbitrary lists about things made in that arbitrary length of time. So here's my top 10 favorite games released last decade, though perhaps the more accurate title is my top 10 favorite games released each year last decade that I could think of when I wrote this list. We're starting in 2010, and looking back, this was still a year of the decade that came before it for the most part. A lot of disposable third-person spectacle fighters. A lot of them. But some good ones too, and other good games, so let's go. Oh, and the spoiler warning for every game I'm about to talk about. I probably won't spoil them, but just in case, if you see a game you still want to play, skip. Okay, you might be real mad at me right now, and I get it. This isn't a good Castlevania game, but you know what? I liked it. Aside from that Ice Golem boss fight, fuck that. But I liked the combat, I liked the puzzles, I liked the characters, I liked Patrick Stewart, and I liked the story. Sorry about it, but it's true. I definitely understand the cynicism surrounding this title. The quote-unquote westernizing of a storied Japanese franchise is bound to betray a lot of what makes the series special. In Castlevania's case, the setting and story already had a western influence, but turning the gameplay into what on the surface was God of War, yeah, I wasn't happy about it either. But I played it, and like I said, I liked it. I think it's a good origin story for Dracula. Now, the sequel, well, we're not talking about the sequel. Gabriel's journey here is honestly an interesting one, and I remember being actually pretty enthralled near the end. I mean, spoilers, but Satan showing up at the end was pretty rad, you gotta admit. The gameplay was more inspired than it had a right to be, in my opinion. Yeah, it was mostly just God of War, but it was a good God of War. The moves were satisfying to use, managing your light and dark magic added some thought to the combat. The platforming sucked, but that's because it was that hold the analog stick in a direction and watch your character do shit platforming that still plagues games to this day. So yeah, number 10, Castlevania Lords of Shadow. If you're still watching after that, let's continue. Most people nowadays know the Divinity series because of the two excellent Original Sin games, but the series has been around since 2002. Until Original Sin, the games were actually action RPGs, starting as one of the millions of Diablo-likes that came out in the early 2000s. Divinity 2, which is actually like the third Divinity game, is a third-person action RPG that features a lot of different ways to play. From melee to range to magic. Okay, you can be a dragon. This is the dragon one. It's the one where you can be a dragon. That's the main hook of the game and what most people remember it for, and it is indeed cool to be a dragon. But I think being a dragon kind of overshadows this game a bit, as it has a lot more to it. The game has a bit of jank to it. This was before Kickstarter and before Larian really took off, so you can certainly feel the budget in this game. But it has just as much character and imagination as the original Sin games, and they put a lot of heart into Divinity 2. There's a lot of different builds you can do, lots of different story paths to take, and you can make your own Frankenstein Abomination Ghoul thing, which is cool. The story is a bit marred sometimes by spotty translations and even more spotting voice acting, but if you're like me and find a lot of that actually just a little bit endearing, Divinity 2 can be a great experience. And also you can be a dragon. travel back in time with me to the year of our Lord 2010. Because back here, Amnesia is a new game. And you know what? It's good. It's good because basically every horror game that's going to come after it for the next 10 years is going to be directly inspired by it. I debated on having Amnesia on here because looking back on it makes it difficult to remember how much I liked that first playthrough. During that playthrough, you don't know what's going on. You don't know that there's basically no punishment for dying, and it's pretty spooky. It did the scare. It's basically impossible to get that experience back if you at all pay attention to horror games, but I do think there's a reason Amnesia influenced the genre the way it did. It wasn't the first game of its kind, certainly. In fact, I'd say the developer's previous game, Penumbra, is the better game, but there's no denying it codified the genre for most of the decade. And I still really admire its simplicity. That might be a weird statement for a game that goes into complicated metaphysical, dimensional magic science, but at its heart, this is just a game where creepy monsters chase you, and it did that well. Better than most $5 horror games you can find on Steam nowadays, anyway. There are certain games you play not because they're a fun video game or tell a story that interests you. Now, I'm not saying Nier doesn't do either of those things, but I think even the most die-hard fans of Yoko Taro's works can agree there's a lot of jank to them. A lot of it intentional. Because you play Nier and games like it because there's nothing quite like them. You're peering into the mind of someone else for a while and whatever they can think of. And that's cool. Nier, I think, has the most heart of all of Taro's games. I'm talking about the US Nier, the father and daughter one. I've never really looked at the one with the younger main character. Nier himself, Vice, Kaine, Emil, they're just great characters. Even the supporting characters have great stories and personalities. I'm not really going to compare the two, but that's something I really miss from Automata. Not that the characters in Automata are bad, but I really grew attached to those in the original. A big reason is just the fantastic English voice acting. They really put more into this fairly niche game than you would probably expect. The gameplay is unique and varied. It's not the main draw of the game, but it's serviceable. The game is only sometimes frustrating or boring, like when you need to grind robots for hours. Also, the multiple playthroughs to get the whole story is not for everyone. Me included. I don't like it. But again, you play these games to be taken on someone else's ride and see what it's like. We go from one of the more niche and auteur games released in 2010 to one of the most commercialized. EA published hyper-focus tested third-person cover shooter schlock that I can't help but like. BioWare today is, some would say Mass Effect 2 was the start of that, but it's just a fun space shoot adventure. I can't help these feelings that I feel. Mass Effect 2 took away a lot of the RPG mechanics of the first one. It's much more of a shooter than an RPG when it comes to its gameplay. But it's a decent shooter, if I'm being honest, and it's not like the original Mass Effect's gameplay was all that amazing to me. The biggest improvement from the first game was, in my opinion, the story and characters. Mass Effect 2 is much more self-contained than the other two games, as evidenced by pretty much every Mass Effect 2 character being relegated to side stories in Mass Effect 3, and I think that's to its great benefit. There's not really much I can say about Mass Effect 2 that others haven't, so I'll just leave it at that. It's the last BioWare game I could say for certain I wholeheartedly enjoyed. And perhaps, if BioWare didn't forget about Zahid, they wouldn't be in the mess they are now. Just saying, he was a fucking cool character, BioWare, and he didn't even show up in 3, come the fuck on, he was so... I like the Pokemans, and nothing was better as a kid than playing Pokemon Silver for the first time. It was like Red and Blue, but better. And then you get to go back to Red and Blue. Blew my fucking mind, man. When they remade the second generation for me, it really kept some of that magic. This is what I consider peak Pokemon just as a video game that you can play. Even though the execution could be better for every Pokemon single-player story, in my opinion, having 2 regions really just pulls me in for some reason. I don't have much else to say. It's Pokemon. And in this Pokemon, your Pokemon can follow behind you, and you can talk to them, and who wouldn't put this in their top 10? You can have little creature friends. It's good. Okay, before any Shin Megami Tensei enthusiasts become enthusiastic towards me, I know Strange Journey came out in 2010, but I didn't play it. I played the remastered version on the 3DS like 9 years later. They seem very similar, but I haven't completed the original, and so I'm not going to put it on the list. But I am going to put Persona 3 Portable on the list, because I also did not play the original Persona 3 until much later, and Portable was my first introduction to the game, and I loved it. I played Persona 3 after I played Persona 4, so I was hit with a little whiplash. 3 is much more, I don't know how to put it, anime than 4, which is obviously very anime, but 3 has many more, let's say, unrealistic elements to its depiction of school life. I'm talking about the android that can talk to dogs, mostly, among other things. While I wasn't too keen on these elements, I did enjoy the darker story and presentation, and the characters I did like were just as enjoyable as the ones in 4. Many SMT fans dislike the visual novel aspects of Persona, but I actually give the Persona series credit for getting me to stomach visual novel aspects. It's not a genre I'm all that partial to, if I'm being honest, but throw in a great RPG with consequences from that visual novel presentation, and I'm there. The collectible nature of Personas, the dungeon crawling elements, the waifus, they're just... fuck, Persona is good. Shin Megami Tensei is good. Why is it so good? Where's SMT5? Where is it? Atlas. You gave us a JPEG of Odin. And then nothing. Where is it? I feel like I'm apologizing a lot in this list. Well, not here, because Alpha Protocol is a good game. It is fun. I like it. Yes, it's mostly unfinished. And yes, the gameplay is initially completely unintuitive, but it fucking stuck to me. I beat it in like 2 days because I was just enthralled, which is strange because I'm usually not one for modern spy stories like this. The writing is just easy to follow. It's hard to explain. It's that Obsidian factor, or at least Obsidian of this time frame factor. It's just easy to get lost in. I liked how it was more RPG than action game, which a lot of people who've even played the game may not notice. I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, people playing it like it's Splinter Cell or something. Well, that in the game can just be a buggy, frustrating mess, but I've never let that stop me from loving a game before. Darksiders is one of the best Zelda games ever made, and I don't actually mean that facetiously, really. It's no secret that the Darksider games, the first one included, take heavy inspiration from other games. This one in particular takes the basic gameplay loop of a Legend of Zelda game, the combat of God of War, and the art style of Warhammer, and it's kinda fucking rad. The comic book style interpretation of the apocalypse, heaven and hell colliding, is cool. The main character, War, is actually pretty likable as far as stoic, growly men go. I like the setup where he just shows up and everyone's pissed off at him and he's got no clue what the fuck is going on. Thinking back on it, I kind of wish more games like this were released today. Just a good, solid action-adventure game. Nowadays, they have to be somber reimaginings of older franchises with the same shallow RPG and crafting tack-ons. Just give me Illidan and a white wig and a big-ass shoulder pad fighting the devil, and I'm good. Before we get to number 1, there's some games absent in this list that I'd like to point out. Call them honorable mentions, though some of them aren't on the list for less than honorable reasons. First of all is Deadly Premonition. You could honestly put Deadly Premonition in Nier's spot and say the exact same things and I'd be fine with it. But in the end, this beautiful twisted mess of a game... Look, when I think about the two games, Deadly Premonition and Nier, I think about them fondly. But only one would I really consider playing again, and that's Nier. I love Deadly Premonition, but even I have jank limits. Next, Metro 2033 could be near the bottom of the list. It was kind of a toss-up between that and Castlevania. Can't really tell you why Castlevania won out, and someone out there is probably pretty upset with that, but it's what happened. Metro 2033 was a great immersive shooter, and I suppose that's all I really have to say about it. I guess that's why it's here. Finally, StarCraft II: Wings of Liberty was released in 2010, and boy was it a thing. I'd like to say that Wings of Liberty is, in my opinion, the best single-player campaign of any traditional RTS, in terms of gameplay. The following is the most cynical thing I'll say in this entire video, so be warned. StarCraft II's story still pisses me off. Sometimes, unbidden as I am laying down to sleep, I will think about the plot and characters of StarCraft II and begin to seethe. I have imaginary arguments in my mind explaining to people who don't exist just how bad they mangled the story of StarCraft. Everything from the personalities to the atmosphere to the lore, just... That's why it's not on the list. Okay? StarCraft 2, great game, but holy shit does it piss me off. This game has had a bit of a resurgence after what came next for the Fallout franchise, with a lot of memes and people lauding it for being the best Fallout game. And I'm here to tell you that yes, okay, yes, it is the best Fallout. I'd like to say it's 2, right? A lot of people see New Vegas as the new trendy Fallout to like, but saying 2 is the best has always been the cool response, right? Well, I love Fallout 1 and 2, but New Vegas is that with honestly better gameplay. It is, in my opinion, peak Fallout. I could go into all the reasons I think this game topples over the other 3D Fallout games, but I don't want this video to just be shitting on other games. New Vegas just understands what a good RPG feels like. It just knows how to make you feel part of the world and like you can affect it. All the different characters and factions you meet, all the different ways you can build your character and tackle quests, it's just good. And the best game of 2010 for me.